That's awesome. That is fantastic. Well, you know what's really good is all this time spent gathering the news stories and all this sort of thing. No one heard a thing because I had the wrong microphone selected because I was in a hurry. So, we'll start from the beginning. Hello, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal podcast. Now that I have a microphone, last week I used the big studio mic and I had the software selected for the studio mic, and because I just rushed in from uh, running errands around Seattle, I hurriedly started the broadcast because we're supposed to start at 6, and I didn't even turn it on till 15 after. And I was looking for news stories and all this type of thing, and um, and I didn't, and I was talking about what I was looking for, and the fact that it took me 3 hours to run errands and all this type of thing. That with all of that, it was just kind of crazy. And in my rush, because I just got back from running errands and all this type of thing, I did not switch the microphone back to one of the microphones I actually have. So this whole time that I have been talking, there's been no sound. But that's okay because you didn't really miss anything. At the top of the screen, there's a green bar that gives me the sound level. And I was diving into the story about the House vote on infrastructure and Build Back Better, and realized I did not have a green bar, which means I did not have a microphone. Ergo, I figured out we didn't have a microphone. But like I said, it's all good and it's all okay because we only wasted about 10 minutes. And the even better part is that no actual content was missed. So, hello everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast. It's a crazy day right now. I am coming to the end of my teaching practicum for grad school, and it's also coming up to be the end of the semester. So I have a lot of things blending together all at once. I do want to make a couple programming notes um, before we get too crazy here. Friday the 12th, which is a week from Friday. Um, yes, Friday the 12th, we will have the weekly news podcast for November 12th. Um, it's the weekend right ahead of my packet, but I'm in a really good place, so I think we can take off an hour and do the podcast. So next week, yes. However, November 19th, which is the Friday heading into Thanksgiving, um, we will not, because I will be out of town and I will not have good internet for live streaming. Also, the Friday after Thanksgiving, the 26th, is also a no. We will pop back on December 3rd. So basically, programming note is next week, yep, we're going to do a show, and then we're going to be off until December 3rd. And then in December, we're just going to do the 3rd and the 10th, and then we'll take off until the new year. So basically, the one of the kind of, things is this is like, three more after tonight, three more podcasts till the end of the year. So, which is just kind of weird. It seems like 2021 just started yesterday. Like, it seems like it was just the heady days of January and February and March and getting vaccinated and all this type of thing. And now I'm already talking about programming for the end of the year. We're talking about taking off for Thanksgiving. We're talking about, taking off for Christmas. We're through Halloween, um, which is just kind of crazy. In my mind. So it's amazing how 2022 is almost already here. And for me, it's even more kind of crazy because this time last year, I was applying to um, grad school to do my MFA, all this type of thing. And now I'm halfway through it, and it seems like I've literally just begun. But here we are. So there you go. So let's get back to infrastructure and build back better. Because um, the House vote that was supposed to happen today kind of sort of didn't. So here's how everything started. It says here that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi of California plowed ahead late on Friday with plans to hold a vote on President Biden's $550 billion infrastructure bill, setting up a showdown with progressives threatening to sink the measure if it doesn't move alongside a larger social spending bill. Pelosi told reporters on Friday afternoon that nothing had changed from earlier in the day. She was still intending to send the package to send the infrastructure bill to Biden's desk and advance a larger package designed to expand healthcare, childcare, and mitigate the climate crisis. Today, we hope to pass the BIF, which is the infrastructure bill, and also the rule of Build Back Better, she said, referring to a legislative term for the infrastructure bill focused on roads and bridges and the social spending plan. Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said it was their goal to pass the social spending bill and send it to the Senate before Thanksgiving. It sets up a remarkable clash between Pelosi and progressives led by Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington, my congressperson, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. The California Democrat can only afford 3 defections, creating a thin margin of error. House Democrats set out to pass both pieces of legislation earlier on Friday, especially after Biden personally appealed to the party to approve them right now, but at least 5 House moderates opposed passing the $1.75 trillion social spending bill, arguing it lacked a score from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office assessing its budgetary effects, such as whether it was fully paid for. That prompted a chaotic scramble from Pelosi and House Democratic leaders to hunt for a compromise capable of satisfying their caucus's progressive and centrist wings. Instead of passing the social legislation, they settled on a procedural vote setting the social bill's debate rules in the House for a later date. But that route prompted strong opposition from progressives like Cori Bush of Missouri, who want both bills to be passed on the same day. Conservative Democrats are trying to tell my community that we should just shut up and accept half a deal, she wrote on Twitter. St. Louis sent me to Congress to do the most for us. We won't accept anything less than the president's full agenda, Bush said. Democratic leaders said they were focused on securing passage of Biden's infrastructure bill and then advancing the social spending package. Even in the face of a progressive revolt threatens to deal a political setback to Biden, Democrats were unfazed and barreled ahead. We're not developing a plan B, Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, the chamber's chief Democratic vote counter, told Insider. So, that it looks like they were planning a vote this morning. It did not happen, which is what I thought. Um, I didn't think that it was going to that the vote was likely going to happen unless something significant had changed. So I was interested this morning when I saw that, and it looks like it is not going to happen. When it comes to what conservative Democrats versus the progressives want in terms of passing these pieces of legislation, I don't think the conservative Democrats realize that in this situation, the progressives, to some greater or lesser degree, kind of hold all the cards. In so much as, um, any, um, if they try to move forward without having the progressives on board, the progressives can walk away from the table and the vote fails. and that that kind of makes it to where, and I think what, progressives understand is that in this situation they actually, unlike years past, they actually have a negotiating position, which means they're able to actually get things out of Pelosi that they want. Um, and so the getting, making the CBO score, all this type of thing is interesting. And to the CBO score, I found an article from Forbes that has to do with the price tag of all this legislation. Now, obviously, when it comes to Build Back Better with the social spending, it has gotten pared down. Bernie Sanders wanted 6 trillion, it got down to 3.75. Joe Manchin's whittled it down to 1.8. Says here, Democrats' social spending bill, the Build Back Better proposal, currently comes with a price tag of 1.8 trillion. But a nonpartisan report Thursday said the package will also raise about 1.5 trillion in revenue through a slew of new taxes targeting corporations and ultra-wealthy Americans, findings that could help the package find the support it needs among spending-hesitant moderates. New tax provisions outlined in Democrats' Build Back Better proposal, as released last week, should help raise about 1.5 trillion over the next 10 years, the Joint Committee on Taxation said in a Thursday report. Apparently, it also includes increasing taxes for foreign corporations, which would bring in about 371 billion through 2031, and a 15% minimum tax on America's largest corporations, estimated to bring in 319 billion. Taxes targeting high earners are estimated to generate about 640 billion, with 228 billion coming from an up to 8% surtax on the income of multimillionaires making at least 10 million annually. A provision that would close a legal loophole allowing wealthy taxpayers to avoid paying the 3.8% Medicare tax would drive another 252 billion, while the 1% surcharge on corporate stock buybacks is estimated to generate about 124 billion. The committee did not analyze all the legislation's tax offsets, which will be instead be reviewed by the Congressional Budget Office, but the Treasury on Thursday said provisions to bolster tax compliance and repeal a prescription drug rebate should raise about 400 billion and 250 billion respectively, bringing total revenues from the package to nearly 2.2 trillion. The new findings should help advance legislation after a months-long impasse. Moderates have been withholding support for the Build Back Better bill until the nonpartisan assessments are released, while House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has delayed a vote on a Senate-passed infrastructure bill until the bigger spending package moves forward. I think the CBO thing is a bit of a ruse. I um I do not think I think the moderates are trying to make it get scored by the CBO in the hopes that the progressives will accept less in order to get something passed. And I think that's also especially true given what happened electorally on Tuesday, um, which is another topic that I wanted to talk about. Because we are definitely going to talk about the electoral situation from from Tuesday. So it's asking for a CBO score is a good move um, on behalf of the moderates. I'm gonna move this camera over here. Because getting a CBO score takes time. It takes a lot of research. Um, it doesn't happen overnight, and I think the moderates are hoping that I think moderates are hoping that that would kind of slow things down, or progressives would be willing to do less or spend less or whatever have you, under the threat of being stuck in scoring hell. Um, on the plan. The reality, the basically the difficulty we have right now is, and I think what's kind of nice for Republicans is the Republicans are not having to lift a finger to stop this agenda from getting through. The Democrats are doing it to themselves. And for them, that's the best part because they don't have to contentiously do a thing. it's all right now inside the Democratic Party. You have progressives who want to go big. They want to spend a lot of money. They want to raise a lot of taxes. They want to do big, sweeping things. And you have moderate Democrats who don't want to spend nearly as much money. And indeed, that is what has pared down Build Back Better from 6 trillion, where it started with, Bernie Sanders, down to a modest 1.75. Um, that is, yeah, that's it's all happening within the Democratic Party right now. And I think moderates are looking at what happened on Tuesday and really wondering if Americans have really signed up for this type of massive social spending, plus all the tax increases to pay for it, and not adding on to the deficit. And especially given in the last couple years, 5 trillion has been spent on the pandemic. Um, and the vast majority of that was debt because Trump passed a corporate tax cut that Republican donors wanted. Um, all this sort of thing that I think, someone told me this the other day. I was talking to somebody, and they said that Barack Obama had said Democrats have a responsibility problem in terms of Republicans are willing to do whatever, and Democrats are trying to be responsible. Um, uh, in everything. I mean, Republicans, if they wanted to do something like this, they would just do it, and they wouldn't concern themselves with how it's going to be paid for. Meanwhile, Democrats are over here wringing their hands, being like, well, are we really doing what's right and what's good? Is it paid for? All this type of thing, rather than just like boldly moving forward with the agenda and worrying about the problems later. And the reality of the situation is that Democrats need a win. Biden has been in office for almost a year, 10 months, and nothing has gotten done. I was reading on Twitter this morning, they were talking about, that, Biden's approval has, fallen 20 points in less than a year. And, and people were saying, well, it's the vaccine mandates and it's how the pandemic is going and all this type of thing. And the main post was saying, like, the stock market is up, unemployment is down, people are going back to work, there's, people are getting jobs, like, things are improving, all this sort of thing. Why aren't Democrats messaging this? And different people had different opinions about why they were unhappy with current leadership. And and they ranged from vaccine mandates to people, to the fact that the Democrats have been in power all this time and really nothing has been done. Democrats need a win. And I think that's kind of where the progressives also have the moderate Democrats over a barrel, is they know the Democrat Party needs a win. I don't think the conservative Democrats are that concerned about that, but they need, there's kind of this this need for a win, and the progressives don't just they're not interested in just passing legislation for the purposes of passing legislation. They are into doing something incredibly meaningful. And that's not a bad thing. Far from it, in fact. That's a great thing. But I think they also, much like how Corey said, they're saying, oh, just accept a deal for the sake of having a deal, and we want it all. Much like how the Tea Party liked to play all or nothing games with Paul Ryan, earlier in the last decade, progressives are doing the same thing with Nancy Pelosi, of saying, not only do we want it, we want it all. We want all the things that we signed up for and we promised and all this type of thing. Um, I think even the broader Democratic agenda suffers from the fact that, people did not get a $2,000 stimulus check. It was 1,400. Oh, and by the way, that was in January. Um, people are, student loan forgiveness has gone from we're forgiving all student loans to we'll forgive $50,000 to we'll forgive $10,000 to we're not doing student loan forgiveness. The Build Back Better agenda has gone from we're going to be expanding Medicare to include hearing, vision, and dental, to now it's just hearing. We're going to do free community college. Well, that got dumped. All this sort of thing. Like, it's just been pared down and pared down and pared down and pared down, to where it's very little. And so I think progressives look at all of this as kind of a last stand for making the social changes that Democrats ran and won on in 2020. And I mean, that's not, that's not unreasonable. That's not surprising. And I think there's real demand for people to have that and get the actual help that they need. And to that, when it comes to get landing those big wins and doing what they promise, it's quite obvious that in a lot of cases, people's unhappiness with the lack of progress on these spending priorities is already hitting Democrats in the ballot box. Um, on Tuesday, we had off year elections across the country. And in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, the incumbent Democrat, was unseated by Mr. Youngkin, who was a Trump endorsed Republican candidate. And he had kind of struck this balance between kind of embracing Trump, but never having Trump come stump for him, kind of being near enough to Trump to make Trump supporters feel good, but not being so near Trump as to disturb um, other voters or end up with the whole debate being about Trump. What he did that was very interesting is he made the discussion about critical race theory, but he also, very importantly, made it about control in terms of, here's something in life that you can control. This is something that you can make a decision on. You can control the education of your children. You can, make sure that, nobody's feeling guilty for being white or anything like that. And I think, the fact that there's this idea of, you should be able to choose, you should have a choice, you should have control after 2 years of the pandemic where we've had much fewer choices than we're used to, where so much has been out of our control and everything has been very autocratic and top down and all this type of thing. I think that narrative of, oh my goodness, here's something that we can take back control of, um, really resonated with people. And so, McAuliffe is out in Virginia, and so ends another Democratic governor. They're getting fewer by the day. However, in New Jersey, Phil Murphy was able to pull it out. It was a squeaker. Last numbers I saw were 49.5, 49.7. Managed to barely pull it through. And I mean, obviously, New Jersey is not entirely unknown for having Republican governors or Republicans winning. Chris Christie being a classic example of that. So it's not unheard of. But for a state that Joe Biden won by 21 points, for a Republican governor to be doing so well a year later, that's not good for Democrats in 2022. It's not. Uh, um, Someone asked me, do you think Democrats are in trouble in 2022? And I said, yeah. I mean, I think if they can get some of this legislation through, that might help, but I think Democrats are in trouble in 2022. I'm less concerned about 2024. And I said, oh, why is that? And I said, well, I think, Republicans are going to fly too close to the sun after 22. They're going to try to undo stuff, change stuff around, all this sort of thing. And, people will say a lot of things. There'll be a lot of really dangerous rhetoric, all this type of thing. The specter of Trump running in 24 will come back around, all this type of thing. People will be turned off and will either be reelecting Joe Biden or will be electing someone new, kind of on the presumption that Joe Biden's only going to be a one-term president. And so they were kind of like, it was kind of like an interesting sort of thing. Yeah, I think 24, I think the 2024 prospects for Democrats are still okay. I think 2022 prospects are not good. I think things, the everyday lives of Americans have to materially improve quite a bit. Now, there is some stuff in Build Back Better that definitely could do that. The daycare funding, the child tax credits becoming permanent, all this type of thing could do fantastic things for working families. And that could do great things. I think the revenue raises and all this type of thing could definitely do great things for the economy. And I think, giving people the freedom to get out there um, and work and do things and live their lives and all this type of thing could be very important. Um, and I think that's difficult as well. Unfortunately, everything hinges on the pandemic. And was just I was watching the Dark Horse podcast with Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying, and they were talking about this new study from the Lancet. And I actually went and saw the study; it is legit in Lancet about how they are theorizing that the efficacy of the vaccines for preventing COVID-19 infection and transmission begins to wane as early as 3 months after your final inoculation. So, and which kind of brought up a discussion of, what does it mean to be fully vaccinated? And um, does, given the fact that, you have your first shot, you're supposed to wait 3 weeks, you're supposed to get your second shot, and then 2 weeks after that, you're fully vaccinated. Basically, judging on the study out of the Lancet, means that after that whole process, you're only fully vaccinated for a month, maybe two, before immunity already begins to wane. Now, it's not unusual for vaccines to do that. That's why we have, booster shots for things like tetanus and malaria and yellow fever and all this type of thing. But um, for, to take so long to get vaccinated, and then for that vaccine to basically to begin to have, a fade that early on when we have the active virus still transmitting around, basically makes the vaccines almost useless. And it goes back to something that someone said on Twitter about a year ago. It was this doctor out of Australia, and she said, um, even after the vaccine, and this time we were waiting on vaccines at this time, and she said, even after the vaccine comes out, we're still going to have to mask and social distance. And this great gal I follow in Australia named Naomi Barton replied, which is how I saw it, and she said, if vaccines are coming and we still have to mask and social distance, what's the point of having the vaccine? And I think now we know is the vaccine's not that incredibly effective. It's not that good. It doesn't last that long. In order to keep, peak immunity, we could end up needing, boosters every quarter. That's expensive and logistically difficult. I mean, that's a really hard thing to do, especially given the fact that it takes 5 weeks to get fully vaccinated. You'll be wrapping up getting vaccinated just in time to start getting vaccinated again. Um, which is difficult. Um, and especially, with the two-shot mRNA vaccines, a little bit different if it's, the adenovirus. And then on top of that, we have another study coming out talking about how vaccines are, um, someone sent me the study. They're talking about how vaccines can interrupt the DNA repairing processes that suppress your immune system, and how they don't know if this is permanent, but it appears that there is a immunosuppressive element to the vaccine that can be quite concerning. And so, on the one hand, we have a vaccine that doesn't last very long and isn't incredibly effective given breakthrough cases. That's the Lancet. Then we're over here and we're looking at a vaccine that may be suppressing immune systems, which may leave us vulnerable to other diseases. And given all of this data, I think at this point, and I say this as someone who has been vaccinated, at this point, I think we have to ask some very meaningful questions about vaccinations re COVID-19. I think we have to ask some questions about what is this? What are we doing? What have we done? How effective is it really? All this sort of thing. I think this is a conversation that we now finally need to have. Um, and especially given, we have vaccine mandates for large employers. All the employees have to be vaccinated by January 4th. Biden announced that rule today. All this sort of thing. There is things that we need to talk about regarding that. So, especially given the fact that so much of our material existence has so much to do with how the pandemic does and how the pandemic eases and all this type of thing. If we're counting on vaccines to solve it, based upon some of the data that's coming down the pike, not only are we suppressing our immune system, which is not good for other things, or it may be causing things that may suppress the immune system, to be accurate with my language, and then we have a vaccine that only lasts 2 to 3 months, that takes more than a month to get, all this type of thing. I think we need to start asking some very serious questions about what we're doing with this whole vaccine campaign, all this type of thing. I'm not saying the technology is bad or that it's not effective. It is. People that are vaccinated are dying at less rates from COVID, um, than the unvaccinated. Most of the deaths over the last 6 months have been from the unvaccinated, not the vaccinated. I'm not saying that, you shouldn't go out and get vaccinated. I've been encouraging everyone to go out and get vaccinated. Absolutely. But what I am saying is that given what we've learned about efficacy and, potential, harm to DNA repair that may cause immune suppression, all this type of thing, I think we have to start asking some very serious questions about the vaccine. And we have to start understanding a little bit better what exactly is going on here, how it affects us, our health, all this type of thing, and understand particularly what we face as we try to bring the pandemic to some type of close. People all over the world are doing a variety of different things when it comes to um, the pandemic. European countries that tend to have very high vaccination rates are really easing restrictions and letting people get back to normal life. Other countries, like India, are still in the throes of, high spread, high contagion, all this type of thing. You have countries like Australia that are having a very bad vaccine rollout time and are still trying to get, people vaccinated, all this type of thing. We've kind of hit a plateau. We once led the world. We're now in the back 40 of OECD countries, all this type of thing. Um, yeah, I mean, um, it's a difficult thing to, with what different countries are doing and how vaccines play into it and how normal life will return and all this type of thing. And I think in this country, I think people aren't going to measurably feel better about things until life starts to really get back to normal. When we stop having virtual events, when we stop having to wear masks everywhere, when life can start to get back to the way it was in February of 2020, I don't think people are going to start to feel much better about the whole thing. And then on top of that, all that's pending on the pandemic, and we have a vaccine that may not work or be effective long enough for us to get sufficiently past the pandemic. I think we're in a bit of a quandary. What are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? What does the future of all of this look like? And to bring this conversation full circle, that's going to have not great electoral outcomes for Democrats in 2022. That's how I started this conversation. We're going, is not going to have very good, electoral outcomes for Democrats, because this is the conversation that's happening right now. This is what people are, thinking about and working on and having conversations with and all this type of thing. And the reality is that, people are tired, they're wore out. You have a lot of people that are not interested in getting the vaccine for whatever reason. Um, and we've really reached a plateau on all this sort of thing, and not things are not going to measurably improve until the pandemic eases, and so that's going to make it very difficult for Democrats to do something in 2022 when it comes to mask and social distancing and all this type of thing. People are just simply running out of patience on a lot of this stuff. And I think a lot of people are, especially if you've kind of gone this long, all this type of thing, I think a lot of people are just ready to say, screw it. If I get COVID, I get COVID. Let me live my life because I've been doing this for 2 years, and it seems like nothing we've done has ever really improved. I mean, it was the same thing, in March of 2020 when we were sitting around being like, stay inside for 2 weeks to, lessen the curve and all this type of thing. And it's like, oh, how naive we were then to think that this was all going to be over in a couple months. And we're still here, 2 years later, still trying to figure it out. So, anyway, I'm sorry I came late. I'm sorry there was no sound for the first 5, 10 minutes, all this type of thing. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. I appreciate it. Um, like I said, programming note, we will have a weekly news podcast next week on the 12th, but we will then not be back till December 3rd, and then we'll do two in December, and then we'll wrap for the year. So be aware of that. So if you're wondering where I went, I haven't left you. I love you. I haven't forgotten you. Just know that there's, due to holidays at the end of the year, the schedule gets real weird. So thank you guys so much for watching if you're live streaming or listening. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.